Oh wow, that was quite some work. I've actually spoken at a few conferences, not a lot, but I've not seen the level of engagement and passion that I've seen, from some of you folks. So I'm actually nervous if I would be able to actually deliver. But I've given this talk a few times, and it is something that I actually enjoy giving because it does deal with some of the core principles of operating a service, especially at scale, and which is why I'm really excited to give this talk. So awesome, lots of sneezing. Bless you. Okay, so let's get started. How many people here in this room know that if you've ever been to a NICU or an ICU, 99% of the alarms you actually see there are false alarms? How many people know this or heard about? Okay. It's not the same when I gave, not the same reaction when or the response when I gave talks at some other places. So you guys are all, probably don't need this talk. But anyway, the point is, in fact, I saw this firsthand when my twins were born. They're 5 now, twin boys, crazy boys. And there was something about the alarm where the nurses, they each time, my wife and I used to freak out each time we heard the alarms. But it was not the same reaction from the nurses. They somehow had this thing going on. So it's quite a scary thing just because, lives are at stake. In fact, research has shown that, why is it not moving? Okay. What happened there? Sorry about that. I need some help. That is so weird. Yep. It's not. Why is it not? It's moving now?
Is this the right place?
Yeah, but why was it? Okay, anyway, sorry about that. In fact, there was an incident where a critical alarm was missed by several different people, and actually, there was a patient who actually died. So this stuff is actually real. There's some key lessons there. I don't want to focus too much on that, but I think the key thing there is more monitoring is not always good, so you have to be sort of judicious with it. But let's talk about tech, right? We're not in healthcare, at least not most of us are. This was like back in when I joined Zynga in 2013. So this story is about that. It's not very deeply technical, but there's some key. Hopefully there's some key takeaways here. This was an initiative I drove, and fortunately I was not dealing with people's lives, so I could take some chances and do some crazy things. All right, so Zynga, as you know, how many people have heard about Zynga? Okay, cool. Yeah, a pioneer, I would say, especially in the launching new games on AWS and then bringing back to a private cloud once the traffic patterns were predictable. So I would say a pioneer in that space, also probably a pioneer in the microservices space, fairly large scale, amazing company. There were some amazing people who I worked with, again, a long time ago. But when it came to alerts, there were about 25 game studios in each sending all these alerts to a central SRE team, which I was running, about 50 people across different places. Tiering model, the number of alerts were anywhere between 100,000 and 200,000. And as you can imagine, per month, a human cannot, a team of humans cannot process so many alerts. There's no way. And then the previous leader before me built up this amazing sort of a tier 1 NOC, and it almost looked like NASA. This was back in Mountain View before we moved to the city. That's not a real photo, by the way. I'm not a huge fan of TV screens, just so you know. But again, humans were looking at these screens and trying to figure out like what's happening and if something is going wrong with our service and things like that. Obviously, not a very scalable model. Additionally, they were doing some pretty creative things like color coding alerts based on priority. And guess what? Pretty soon we actually ran out of colors. I'll touch on that sometimes in another slide. But we quite literally, ran out of colors. And as you can imagine, SRE was best effort. So if you were a game studio making a lot of money, you were given a lot of preference. But if you were not, and even though you were like a good citizen and keeping your things clean, you were not given the right level of service. Again, not a great thing in the world. I mean, like people should not be able to get away with that shit, right? It's not good at all. But again, best effort or whoever made the most noise got the support. Okay. As a result, as you can imagine, too many alerts, best effort, too many outages, customers were suffering. Every day was scary. I still remember, living in a lot of anxiety for several weeks and months, going into, especially after I joined, it was a new company, and I was always like about that dreaded phone call, why is your team not responding to alerts? So not a great situation to be in. The previous leader, again, just so you know, tried to do a bunch of things. Like throwing people at the problem is not a great strategy, just so you know, right? You can throw people at the problem, but I don't think you can scale too far. So that's not going to work, just in case you're wondering, because you can never have enough people looking at so many alerts. Additionally, filtering noise is also not the right strategy. As I mentioned, we ran out of colors, and then there was a critical alert where I think it was SOX compliance, and the screen started flashing. So each time there was a SOX alert, because just to get the attention. So it was that, pretty bad. Again, obviously, as I said, like more heads is not the answer. So what is the answer to this problem? Is what I was like struggling with. Okay, before you attempt to solve a problem, my recommendation is like have a strong vision or a strategy for the way you're trying to attack a problem, right? So in my case, the vision was always to try to get to less than 2 alerts a shift. If you have globally distributed teams, no more than 2 alerts per shift, so that you can keep up with root causing the alert. It's very important to root cause the alert. And again, ownership is big. I'm big into that. So if you have wrote it, you own it. So I wanted the development teams to, in this case, the studios, to get the alerts directly, bypassing the SRE team where applicable, and also wanted the SRE team to focus more on like the tooling and the infrastructure part, the platform stuff, where the development teams don't necessarily have an incentive to become an expert at. And but this is how a sample conversation with the dev team looked like. So I was like, dude, or whoever, stop spamming. And the response I got was, can you go back to your team and have them respond to alerts in a timely fashion before we even talk strategy? So that was not very encouraging at all. I was trying to focus on the root of the problem, but getting a lot of pushback. Additionally, my team, this may be applicable to some of you guys as well, but if you're stretched too thin, again, this pyramid, I stole this from the SRE book, but it's a great way to look at the complexity of, from a reliability perspective, starting from the lowest to the highest. And if you looked at my team, they were like all over the place, right? Some people were doing like product check-ins and, improving the reliability of the product. Some people were like, again, a tier 1, looking at the screens and staring at the screens. So which meant we were not able to, really deliver on any single thing that we were responsible for. Okay, but I engaged, I persisted, I made some progress. But I wasn't sure like what exactly I should be doing, in terms of making a big improvement. So I was struggling with that, like really struggling with that. Spoke with a bunch of people, interviewed a lot of people, and slowly was trying to understand like, where this was going. And then there was a massive outage one day. And there were more outages, the same root cause. I think it was a broadcast storm, and the application was not able to gracefully handle that. It was crashing. And then there were multiple outages. And then during one of the outages, I had this like brilliant idea where, okay, any guesses what I did? Anyone? What did I do? I had this brilliant, amazing idea. Not quite. Eventually we did. No, I did do something. Someone said it. I did not do anything. I did do something. Pretty interesting. Any other guesses? More colors? No, I said like more colors is not going to do it. And more people is not going to do it. No way. Turned off, that's a pretty good, but we were like making a lot of money, and the dev team, I think I just had a couple babies and I wanted a job, so I could not, I don't think that was an option. Any other guesses at all? What's that? Stop fixing it. Anyway, that was also not an option, but anyway. That's what we did. I mean, you probably heard about SLOs and alert budgets, right? I don't think this term existed back then, but the idea was simple. I said, you're sending all these alerts to my team, and we just can't handle this. So how about we sit down and establish contracts as to what kind of alert budgets you're allowed to have within a time frame, usually a week or a month. If you go over, normally what I've seen people do is they say, no more pushes, or let's focus on fixing it. But I said, you know what? We just can't support you anymore. So essentially, we formed, again, figuratively speaking, a clean room. The initiative was called a clean room, and the studios were in that room only up until they were clean, which means they had to be within the alert budgets. If they went over, they'll be kicked out, right? Temporarily, so they can go back, clean their things, and come back into the alert. The advantage was obviously, you're trying to align incentives, so they have incentives because if they want SRE support from my team, they're always like free to go hire their own, SRE team again, which is, as you know, hiring SREs is really, really, really hard. So that was like the I would say, trying to reward good behaviors, creating the right incentives, like the core of the idea. How does the idea sound? Is it good? Awesome. But as you can imagine, implementing it, and ideas are cheap, right? I mean, I think anyone can have them. But I think implementing it was hard. I've had people who quite literally said, we pay, you exist because, we had to give up a headcount, the dev teams. How you just can't do that. There are lots of escalations to my boss and my boss's boss and things like that. But I'll talk about how to deal with that in a later slide. But this was the initial reaction. My team, as you can imagine, if you remember that slide, I was like, let's focus on one thing. Let's prove that we can deliver on one thing. And eventually we'll be given more. So I was trying to take some responsibilities away so that we could focus on monitoring. Because if I go back to a dev team or a studio and say, we'll give you this support, we'll give you this like 5-minute SLA for every alert or an incident, then we have to sort of raise the bar and make sure that we are able to deliver. So the team was like, what's going to happen to me? What about job security? My response was obviously, in fact, before that, some people even threatened to quit but if you are trying to, I think in my opinion, if you're trying to do something as crazy as this, trying to bring about a transformational change, you have to take a stance, and not everyone's going to be happy with that. But having said that, though, saying no is hard, but it's so important. In fact, if you read this article, which I highly recommend reading it from HBR, it's an important skill anyone should have, for that matter. I'll be talking on this topic a lot, during the session. Again, the same thing to my team is like, let's take baby steps, and eventually, if we can execute on that, we'll be given more responsibilities, and I think that'll be setting us up for success. Additionally, what this would mean is once we are not focusing on monitoring noise, which is essentially what we were doing, we can actually get to work on higher value add things, which was not possible before. All right. And I said no to the dev teams. And again, this is also a pretty important concept. I mean, SRE support is something that should be earned. Should not be given free. So it's just, as a matter of fact, any support has to be earned. Otherwise, so again, establishing those budgets, SLOs, is going to be key. I think before I go to the results, if you remember, obviously we made the announcement, lots of reactions, and so the next 4 or a few slides are about what are some of the tactics or some of the things that you can be doing to, if you are driving an initiative like this, in your company. These are some of the things that will actually going to help you, drive forward your initiative. So the first thing, leverage outages, right? So when I was doing this, I was conducting postmortems, everywhere, sending weekly reports. Build your credibility. Make sure that people know that you care. That's very important, and people should be taking you and your vision very seriously. Otherwise, this is not going to happen. So in my case, I used that postmortem, that massive outage that actually happened. So use them to drive changes. Second point, very important, like find your allies, right? Again, common sense. Make sure that people are, you find people who are like radically aligned with you. In my case, it was like Zynga CTO. He's an awesome guy. Still at Zynga, you just have to, and they're not going to come to you. You have to go and find them. You have to go and find people who are willing to be your champions. Again, the aha moment. Again, there's no substitute for going and talking with people. Trying to exchange ideas on what problem they're trying to solve. In my case, it was just amazing that everyone wanted the alert volume to be low, but no one was actually doing it. Was looking at this holistically or horizontally. And then I think my team was in that unique position to do it, so we did it. So you'll be amazed as to just go and speak with people. Just ask what is it that you're struggling with, and you'll get amazing answers. Again, when this happened, I remember that outage. I called my boss. Make sure that your boss is aligned. Make sure that your boss's boss is aligned, and all the way to the top of your organization. Otherwise, you can't drive initiative like this. So it's important. It's going to take a lot of lot of talking, a lot of PowerPoint slides, or a lot of convincing to do. But make sure that there's consensus before you launch something like this, so that you're not surprised later. Again, buy-in from senior leaders, important. Make sure that your initiative is visible across the company, and they are, the key stakeholders are bought into. In my case, it was like the CTO and SVP and everyone else. Of course, my boss as well. Great. Now we sit down. That's a plan, and we baseline the alerts and come up with targets. So every team had a target. Some were higher, some were lower, and we give teams time to go and clean their things, alerts, and pretty soon this became a corp initiative. This was a company sort of wide goal, and we were sort of program managing it pretty carefully, looking at the alert and the trends, every single every other sprint, and all that good stuff. All right, so if you guys are wondering, how do I go about actually reducing the alert noise now that I have an idea? That's one of it. Again, I don't want to sort of dig too deep into this, but I would probably be interesting to see. Again, these are some of the. I think, before you fix something, first define what an alert is. Sometimes people don't like what's an alert, what's an incident? To me, an alert is something which is, it's important to fix, is actionable, is something that needs immediate attention. If something can wait, that's not an alert. Alert is also something that requires human intelligence to fix. If not, it should be automated. The alert should be auto-remediated or auto-fixed. The other thing is, if something is not super critical, it can always be a ticket. It doesn't have to be an alert. So that's also something to keep in mind. Again, there's several different ways to approach this. I mean, I'm not going to again, if you look at the slide, there's things like alert aggregation, and you can program manage it. But one thing I've found useful, which is also slightly controversial, is like the public shaming thing. What I mean by that, again, don't be stupid and don't just that shame people. But what I'm trying to suggest is, once you have a large initiative that you're running, no one, once that initiative is actually approved by the management and the executives, no one likes to see large numbers next to their names, right? It's just we don't like to see that. So you can use that as a strategy. Again, assuming you're not a jerk, or just try to do the right thing. But it could be a good, effective way to try to move your initiative forward. Other than that, again, alert aggregation. Ideally, it should not be an alert in the first place. So if you have something like an event-driven automation where alert flows through a rules engine, and then you can automatically remediate the situation, then it doesn't even have to be an alert in the first place, right? So I'm not going to touch too much on that. And then in terms of, again, I just talked about this, aggregation and tickets and things like that. Also be looking at the symptoms versus the root cause. So have a strategy for that. Just so you know, I work at Microsoft now, and the team, even before I joined, we have something called a CIA, Customer Impact Assessment. We are able to actually accurately pinpoint which customers in which regions, and which accounts in Azure are actually impacted. So it's a pretty sophisticated model. So we really don't have to worry about the underlying noise. Or the root causes. It doesn't matter what the root cause is. We exactly know which customers are impacted. It's pretty awesome. Again, baby steps. Pilot. Make sure that you are, you're focusing on small wins. Pick a team. If you're doing, again, common sense stuff. Not, nothing. It's not like rocket science or anything. Leverage your allies. It's important, especially for the bigger teams who have a lot of alerts. It's important to be able to work with them closely, and then exchange best practices, especially if you're an SRE team, to reduce the alert volume down. And momentum will pick up, assuming you're showing the wins. And then we launched. A few teams were actually kicked out. Again, the power of no. Some teams were given a bit of a slack, again, just because some teams had more attrition and they were going through some issues. But again, it's important to sit down and have a conversation if you are going to give an exception for a team for a certain period of time, right? Yeah, clean room was a success. The alert volume dropped by 90%. Probably more than 90%. We were able to give a 5-minute SLA response time. I think most importantly, the credibility of the team was back, which meant we could take on more. All the screens were almost gone. I mean, I don't know now, but the 40 or 50 screens were sort of consolidated into one, because we were sort of moving away from the model. I think most importantly also, the uptime went up by a whole 9. I'm not going to give you the number, but it went up by a whole 9. And it was good. It was the customers were happier. I was able to sleep a bit more, peacefully, without the anxiety. Yeah. So that was it. And I have some closing thoughts in terms of if there were key takeaways here. I think all we did was align the incentives. It's so important that the incentives are aligned. So if you go back and if you are struggling with a problem, I think this would be a good strategy to have, where you're trying to align the incentives. It's not going to be easy, especially if you're going to say no. A big part of this is saying no, because honestly, the incentives were not aligned. But again, there's going to be conflict. But if you can stand firm, especially if you're trying to bring about a transformational change, it's important to be firm, stand your ground. And then, it's not enough if you as the leader are, saying no. You should, all your teams, I think it's more important that the teams are empowered to say no. I cannot stress how important that is because they are the ones dealing with, on the ground and, working with the other teams. Yeah, again, I picked it up from HBR. So unless it's common sense, right? Unless you say no to low-level things or things that don't add a whole lot of value, you cannot say yes to things that actually matter to your customers. So that's very important. Yeah, and I always like to ask each time I join a team. The very first thing I ask is like, why do we exist? What value are we providing? What's the right engagement model? You have those conversations. Usually, those conversations lead to building good relationships, and ultimately, will be the deciding factor between an initiative like this being successful or not. Cool. That's it. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention.